Hello! We are talking about productivity apps today, which is one of my favorite topics. Longtime fans of the channel will know that I love Notion. I've been using Notion for years, at least since 2021, though I think I started in mid to early 2020, maybe a little earlier. It's hard to keep track. I'm sure there's a record of it on my channel in the form of videos. So I pretty much use Notion for everything. But I'm getting carried away because we're not talking about Notion today. We're talking about Obsidian. And the reason I've brought up Notion is because some people will compare Obsidian and Notion as two alternatives to solve the same problem. And I'm going to talk about why this might or might not make sense, but at the focus point of it, they do both offer you a place to store and organize and analyze information that you collect throughout your day. So they are similar in that regard. And while I have been using Notion for years, I had never used Obsidian before. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I got kind of like sucked into a YouTube vortex about Obsidian about a week ago, and I've just been like binge watching videos, installing it, playing with it, trying out a bunch of the community plugins and the core plugins. And now I'm going to talk in this video about what Obsidian is, how I've been using it, whether I think it's a useful part of a routine going forward, whether it will replace Notion, and just kind of who I recommend this app for. If you're looking for something like this, a way to manage your notes and other information in your life. But hello, I'm Savalian. I make videos about games, development, and creativity, and we're gonna get started. First, let's cover what Obsidian actually is. It describes itself as a flexible note-taking app, and that's pretty accurate. It does not attempt the same things that Notion does in its branding. Notion is very focused on being this full-featured workspace, supporting projects and collaboration, and more recently AI integration. Obsidian is first and foremost for collecting information into one place and then connecting that information together. You can install Obsidian very easily from their website. There really is just one step to get started. You just create a vault, which is what they call the folder where you're going to put all your notes. And once you do that, you're ready to go. And that's an important difference to Notion. By default, Obsidian is just a collection of files on your computer. If you want to sync it to another machine or keep an online backup, there are ways to do that, but it does not come built in as part of the software like Notion does, which is all saved in the cloud, hosted by Notion, and then accessible from any device that you can install Notion on. Once you're in Obsidian, there's really one striking difference that I think sums up the entire experience for me. With Notion, typically you set up a structure for your notes first. You might create a page or a series of pages, a database or two, and then you fill that note structure with your notes and fill in all the properties for your databases. And it's a very top-down system where you design what the data is going to look like and then you plug it in as you go. Obsidian, on the other hand, really supports and kind of guides you toward building your structure out of your notes as you go. And what I mean by this is that you can create notes at the root level or within a folder, and then you can connect those notes to basically any other note in your whole vault. And if you get into community plugins especially, like I'll talk about, I very much got into community plugins. You can easily query and use notes from anywhere in the hierarchy, and the structure of each individual note is not dependent on a database or any other piece of your note system, really. It's all totally free and open and very flexible. I've heard a lot of people talk about Obsidian as an app that encourages serendipity, finding connections between things by chance that you might not have found otherwise, and I can really see why that would be possible, just based on how it's structured. The good news is that the notation used for Obsidian is just a flavor of Markdown. So if you have experience with Notion or GitHub documents or like READMEs, this will be very familiar. So I'm just going to make a new sample note. To start, we have headers, just a hash mark and a space. If you don't leave a space, it turns into a tag. Hash mark space, this is a heading 1, 2 is heading 2, and they get smaller all the way down to heading 6. And I'm not going to go over everything you can do with Markdown because there's plenty of videos about that, and I'm also not an expert, but just a couple of really useful things. If you want to make a bulleted list, which I find myself doing a lot for the sake of just like breaking up thoughts, it's just a dash and a space. Just like Notion. And then if you hit enter, it will automatically add another bullet point. And then if you just hit enter twice, it will get you out of that bullet point mode. And then checkboxes, a little bit trickier. If you do a dash and a space, open bracket, space, closing bracket, this makes a checkbox. Or if instead you put an X in here, it will check it off. There are also some special checkboxes that are only available in specific themes. I've got the default one on right now for demonstration, but you can always look into it. There's some, like if you put a arrow, it will put a little send icon, or if you do this one, I think is often the calendar. There's a lot of them, but obviously they're not showing in this theme, so I'm just going to leave it how it is. And another very important thing is linking, and this is really where they've put a lot of their effort into expanding the system and making it easy to use, because this kind of is the thing that makes the notes interconnected and makes them useful and related to each other. So if I just do 2 square brackets, it will fill in the ending brackets automatically, at least in preview mode. But then I can pick anything here. I have a note where I've written down all my notes for this video, so I'll put that in here, and I can include this in like a whole sentence. Is a video I'm working on right now. I planned it to, let's see, and you can do dates. If you do daily notes and you want to connect different thoughts to certain days or times, I can go, what's today? 20? And then you see this one that I've made does not exist. I don't have a note in my Obsidian that exists with this title, but what I can do is I can control click and it will create it for me. So that's nice. And then whenever you have links to anything, if you go to that thing, you can see the backlinks. There's this little button. I think you can get to it. Yeah, you can get to it up here as well. But you can see it was linked in this note, and you can see a little bit of context about where it was linked and what it said. So this is really a good way if you have notes about a topic, and if you've linked things together in a way that makes sense, you can click this here and you can see like, oh, I mentioned this on this other page. You can actually go to it, and then you can just click back if you want to go back. But this is one of the really powerful ways that notes are like processed and connected, and how that information is used. You know, this is where a lot of the serendipity comes in that a lot of people really like about Notion, where as you go, you just keep connecting things and ideas, and then later, maybe that connection resurfaces and it helps you understand something better, or it answers a question that you had, or it gives you a new idea. But another very cool thing that I found out, I'm just gonna do test heading 2. This is the information below test heading. So something very cool that you can do in links. Okay, I actually just learned how to do something yesterday, and then I apparently forgot how to do it, so I had to look it up again. But another cool thing you can do in Obsidian is you can link to headers. So if I do the 2 brackets, I select my thing and then I do the hash mark. It will bring up all the headings in that page. This one just has one. And then when I go out to reading view, it creates a link that shows sort of the path that this link follows. But another very cool thing that I can do, if I just copy this here, if you put an exclamation point in front of the link, it will insert what you've linked to. So this is a way, this is very cool. I was looking for a way to do this and just kind of stumbled upon it as I was binge watching more Obsidian videos. This is something I've really wanted to do because it's a way to keep like reference data in one place and then use it in another place without just copying it and pasting it there. So very cool, and that's the exclamation point before the link that does that. I have no idea if it works with like entire pages. Let's try that and see. Okay, it does work with entire pages. I'm sure there are limits on this as for how effective it will be to do things like this, but I think this is really nice. And as you'll see in some of these screens, I'm in what's called preview mode or live preview mode or something like that. But because these pages are written in Markdown, there is a sort of source mode where you can see all of the Markdown. And then there is a reading mode where you can see it the way it's rendered out. So then you'll see the actual heading sizes, you'll see the checkboxes, you'll see the formatting. So if you ever get into a place where all you see is this and you don't know why, there's little buttons up here at the top, or you can click the little ellipsis menu to go into reading view. So you have this collection of Markdown files that make up your notes. Maybe they're linked together, maybe they're not, maybe they're in a hierarchy, but that's the basic feature set of Obsidian. It's really just a folder full of notes. But you can extend the functionality with plugins, and this is where Obsidian gets really fun. If you're like me and you love just playing with productivity apps, this is where you can have a lot of fun. There are some core plugins which are developed and maintained by the Obsidian team, but then there are also community plugins that can be developed by anyone. Community plugins do have some inherent risk because they are developed by a third party, but just like with anything you install to your computer, make sure it's something that is widely used by other people and they're happy with it, or make sure it comes from a developer that you trust, and it should be fine. When I started using Obsidian, I tried really hard to experience the core feature set first and see how that works and how that felt, because I really like to play with productivity apps like this, and I knew that once I opened the door to really customizing with all kinds of like both core and community plugins, that would kind of be it for me. So the only problem with that is you do have a very blank screen when you start, and I wasn't quite sure what to put into it. So I started with the common advice among people who make videos about Obsidian, which is to keep a daily log and slowly expand your collection of notes from there. And this is kind of in line with something I was really hoping to get out of Obsidian. I read Building a Second Brain a while back, and I've kind of implemented some of the concepts from that book into my routine and into my life, but I've been struggling to find a good way to manage quick notes, like little notes that I take or little things that I write down, or like I'll take notes on a book or a video, and it's been very hard for me to put the notes into a place where I can easily find them later, which is kind of the whole point of building a second brain, is so that you can find it again later. And Para doesn't totally click with how I plug things into my notes, and I don't have a good place to drop things where I can easily sort them, figure out what I added and where I put it, and actually distill information out of it later. So I'm hoping that the free nature of Obsidian and the connected nature of Obsidian will make it easier for me to put a system like this into practice. That's just a hope, I don't know for sure yet if Obsidian is going to work for that, but it's one of the things I'm hoping for out of this little experiment. One thing I loved immediately about Obsidian is that it is laid out very much like an IDE that you might use for writing code. You can have a lot of different windows. You can dock them in different parts of the screen, wherever you want, just by clicking and dragging. And it's so easy. It's so easy. Every app should work like this. Notion just added tabs this year, if I remember right, and the workspace that Notion offers is pretty limited in my opinion. So I am loving this. This is a huge plus for Obsidian. I'm also loving the themes, which I spent a lot of time playing around with, and I'll talk about those in a bit. Once I felt like I had spent enough time using the core plugins to really get a feel for Obsidian and what it is, I immediately started trying out every community plugin I could find. I won't go into super huge detail on anything here because there's a lot of them and there's just a lot to talk about, but I will briefly touch on the ones that were most memorable. So Templater is one of the first ones that I tried, and it's an alternative to the core plugin templates, and it's just a bit more powerful. It uses a templating language that is similar to Django, which I liked a lot. I used to work with Django for my job, and I thought it was pretty nice. In the end, I think Templater is a little more complicated than I'll probably use routinely, but it was fun to play with, and if you want to make some very detailed templates, maybe it's the right option for you. Periodic Notes is recommended by a lot of people that I found on YouTube. It lets you use some shortcuts to create a specific kind of note attached to a certain time frame, so every day, week, month, quarter, or year. I really like this, and I'll probably try to use this for planning stuff and reviewing those plans. But I did see people talking about being able to have different sets of notes for this, like multiple types of notes per day or per week. But I can't find anything like that. I see settings that let me have one kind of note for each time frame. So I'm not sure exactly what they were referring to, but that's a minor thing. Overall, I do think this will be pretty useful. Dataview is another widely recommended community plugin, and it is extremely fun and powerful. It lets you use queries to search your notes, and then you can use those queries to create tables, lists, collect some checklists. There's a lot of stuff you can do based on your query parameters. I am very excited about the possibilities of dataview, and if I continue to use Obsidian and continue to learn more about dataview, I'll certainly double back with a video on how I'm using it because it's very cool. It is not as immediately powerful as Notion's databases because there is a learning curve. You are going to spend some time learning how it works, learning how to get the information that you need out of it, but if you do want to collect data from different parts of your notes and display it all in one place, this is the only plugin I know of that can easily do that. And now I'm going to talk about theming. So I didn't actually get a recording of when I set all this up. It was kind of a long process, but it was a fun process because I got to play with a lot of different options. But this is the theme that I'm using. I love themes. Anything that lets me add color and just like change the visuals to fit what I want. I love that. And that's one of the places where Notion is really lacking, is in theming and in being able to change things like colors, page backgrounds. I know they've got things like the images and the icons where you can add a little bit of flair to what you're looking at, but for the most part, Notion looks like Notion, and that's just how it is. Obsidian, on the other hand, has an entire marketplace thing. It's not, you don't pay for them typically, but there is like a whole screen here where you can look at all these different themes that people have made. And usually they'll show what the theme looks like in dark or light mode with different accent colors selected. Let's see. A very popular one that I did play with for a little while is called Minimal. And if I remember right, the person who made this, Kipano, is actually now the CEO of Obsidian, if I remember right. I hope that's correct, but this theme is very clean. It looks very nice. It has those custom checkboxes that I talked about earlier. And then if you want to configure it like really heavily, you can get a community plugin called Minimal Theme Settings, and that will let you go a little bit further in how you customize it. But the one I'm using is called Anupuchin. I don't know if this is pronounced right, but it's by a developer called Anubis, and they do mention here that they're currently kind of on a hiatus from maintaining it, so that's fine. It works as far as I'm concerned. There's a couple of little visual artifacts. If we go back and look at what it looks like, there's like these little shadows and things. That doesn't really bother me too much, but if it bothers you, you might want to pick something else. But what I really like about this one is the layout that separates the panels into their own little sections here. So you can see I've got this blue as my background color. This is my accent color. And the panels have this nice rounded floating image on top of the background. And if I full screen it, it looks a little bit better, but for whatever reason, I just really like note apps to be a little bit like farther away, so to speak. Something about having them full screen overwhelms me a bit, so I like to have it a little bit like this. And all these heading colors you can customize. I just really like this theme. It looks so nice and clean. It has options to make rainbow colors on your folders, which is like it's just a little tiny thing, but it's so cute and I like it a lot. So there's all this stuff that you can customize about this one. I'm going to reference Nicole Vanderhoeven's video on this theme because she goes over just a ton of ways to customize it. And I pretty much followed that video to the letter to get mine going, but that's it. That's the theme and I love it. Prompted by my new beautiful theme, I started looking for ways to make everything a little bit prettier, a little bit more visual, and so I started looking into charts and data visualization. This is a place where Notion has been a little bit lacking for me as well, where like they have certain views that do look really nice, the calendar, the timeline, the gallery if you set that up. But making graphs or charts in Notion is very difficult. They've got the mermaid integration, but that requires quite a bit of learning to get it set up. And so I just wanted to see what Obsidian has available. And I found Obsidian Charts, which is a community plugin. And I was able to, after a little bit of playing around, get some simple charts going that they have these nice features where you can like toggle different data series. You can sort of see the values when you hover. It's very nice, very sleek. You can also make a chart from a table. And then also you can use dataview to create the table, or you can use dataview directly in the chart if you would like to do that using dataview.js. But I've used these in a couple places that I'm excited to share, and it's definitely still got a learning curve. So it's not like 100% super easy, but the basic setup is just a code block of type chart, and then you have these YAML properties, type, the labels, the series, the name of each series, and then the points in that series, and a lot of this does have to match up in order for it to work, especially with indentations are very important. And then, unfortunately, at least for me, the documentation on formatting these is a little bit, like some of the examples have the formatting wrong, and so I had to just sort of figure out how this goes. I don't have a ton of experience with YAML, so the indentation sort of scheme is not super familiar, but I got it working. We've also got the table working where you just pass an ID to the chart instead of filling in the data yourself, and then it will pull. We can see the ideas right here. But I've also done some cool stuff with dataview that I'll get into in a little bit. But for now, I'm really happy with how the chart came out. I think it looks pretty good. I also tried out Obsidian Projects, which offers a very Notion-like structure where you can create new project notes and view them on a calendar, a Kanban style board, a gallery, and there's one other one, a table. A table is the last one. And it's very structured and nice, and I think it could be really useful for some people who want to view their projects that way. But it didn't feel right for me. I think I didn't like the aesthetics of it. I didn't like the options that they had for customizing how they looked. And so I just felt like I would rather set something up with a data view in Markdown, maybe with some CSS styling or something like that, that I just would like a little bit better. And then finally, a hidden gem, April's automatic timelines. This is a very cool little plugin that it's actually designed for D&D, for when you have events that happen on a timeline. The way it's set up is that you can include like made up date time systems by configuring some of the regexes in the settings. I've just used normal human time because I think that this would be really useful for viewing projects like over the course of a year. You see which projects start and end when. It's a little bit like reminiscent of a Gantt chart, but a lot more simple. And I just think it comes out looking so sleek. Like all I had to do to set these up were add this render enabled, tell it which timeline or timelines it should be included in, and then give it a start date and an end date. And then the content is optional, but it shows up in the timeline if you add it. So really, like there's a couple of properties that you add to the things that you want to show up in the timeline, and then it just works. So we can see this just says AAT vertical. As far as I know, April is working on a horizontal timeline, but is not quite there yet. So there's just this one vertical one. You give it the name, and then this goes through all of the nodes that you've tagged with this timeline name, and it just renders them out so nicely. You can also configure the colors for this as well, which I have, just a little bit. They're pretty similar to what they were by default, but I didn't have to do anything to configure the cards or the layout. This is just how it looks, and that's kind of my one request, which I'm sure is coming, is just a way to make the events on the timeline look a little bit different. For example, these are pretty big blocks, and I may not want them to be so big if I'm looking at like projects for an entire year. But it's really nice and it's really easy, and I think that this community plugin is a little bit underhyped. I think more people should be talking about it because it's got a lot of possibility, a lot of potential, I think. Okay, and once I was really comfortable working in Notion, managing my notes, playing with these different plugins, I started to try and figure out if I could set something up to work the way that my Notion currently works as a quarterly focused goal planning system. I currently use a method based on the 12-week year where I set goals for the quarter and then I break it down by each week. So what I did to try and see how this would work was I made a couple of templates, one for a weekly log, one for a daily log. I didn't quite get to quarterly just because I ran out of time. And then before I even did any of this, I started taking notes on what I wanted Obsidian to do for me, what I wanted to include in here, different ways I wanted to be able to look at my like current goals, my current objectives, my current projects. And then I got into the template building. And the idea is that I would use periodic notes to create one of these every week and then one of these every day. And starting with the week log, the first thing I did was add some of those April's timeline parameters just automatically to the template, just in case I want to be able to view these on a timeline. I'm not sure if that would actually be useful because they would just be, each day, but it might be a nice just visual way to see all the weeks of the year at a glance and be able to like click in to each one in order. I think that might be kind of nice. And then I've just got a little header here, and I use these fun call out blocks. The way that you do these is you do the block quote at the beginning, and then there's in brackets exclamation point, and then the name of the kind of block. There's several kinds. You can look these up. Then you have a title, and then in the content you can include checkboxes. You don't have to. You can put whatever you want in here. But I just use these call out blocks to add some notes for what I want to do at the start of every week, and then down here I have at the end of every week. Just like a fun visual way to indicate like frequent things that I'm repeating. And then here I actually have a data view where I'm grabbing all the tasks in the date frame of this week. And because I'm using a templater to fill in some of these values, it doesn't actually work until you create a copy of it. So if I go, let's see, did I ever set this up? Yes, I did. So I've set this up and it is actually pulling in these tasks. So this is one of the cool things that dataview can do, where you can just grab all the checkboxes in a certain note and pull them in automatically. And then below that, I just have a little section to write down important events, workouts, meal planning, whatever is at the week level that I want to schedule on here. And then I'll probably try to figure out a way to, just like with this, with the tasks, pull in all the daily notes that go under here. So I'll probably put a data view block in here and query for all the daily logs that fall within this date frame as well. And that's just a couple of the ways you can start to connect things together in a way that's somewhat automated. Until I figure out a little bit more about Templator, I think I'm going to have to fill in some of these values manually once I've created it, but that's totally fine. It's totally fine. It's very powerful. You just need to figure out how to actually use it, which is, that's one of the biggest differences between Obsidian and Notion, is that Notion has a lot less of a learning curve. There is still a bit of a learning curve, especially if you want to get into like roll-ups and formulas and relations that work in a certain way. But for the most part, because it does have this very predictable structure, you can just Google a very quick tutorial and find out exactly how to do anything. Obsidian does have a lot of content around tutorials and how to use it, but because it tends to be so much more personal, it's a little bit harder to find exactly what you need. And then the daily log, I have another very similar thing, but I've also added a lot of properties that I honestly probably won't use, but I have some around time tracking and then some around habit tracking. And my idea, my dream is to use this to populate some charts, make sure I'm doing, getting my steps, tracking my sleep, working on various projects, and then I'll be able to sort of visualize all of these numbers if I fill them in on the daily log, which I might not, but I've added it here kind of in optimistic thinking that I will do that. I've got the same like sort of start of day, end of day task lists. And then this data view will pull in all projects where this current date of this card is between the start and end date of the project. So any open projects should show up here. I don't currently have any, and I haven't even talked about the project template yet. But I've also just got tasks, notes, gratitude, things that I want to remember that I did good. Just, your typical daily note sort of structure. And then finally, this one was the most fun for me. I've made this project template, and if you remember, I decided not to use Obsidian projects in favor of something I was sort of rolling on my own. I've got the start and the end date in the April timeline format. And then it's just got this little nice thing. I'm pulling in all the tasks by project name, and then I've got these fun little visualizations. I've got a heat map, which took me a bit to get working, but there's a very, very substantial example that you can use to pull in data with dataview.js. And so I've used that here. There's still a little bit more customization I want to do on this, but it works. It tracks. I've just got this little property in tasks called minutes spent, which I'm going to use to track how much time I spent on it, and that's going to be in the heat map. And then I've also got a burn up chart, which basically just means this top line is the total amount of like effort I've committed to, how many tasks I've created, and their total. And then the pink bar underneath is how much I've completed. So in theory, what this will look like is near the beginning of a project, I will have a lot of tasks open, and that blue bar will go up really high. And then at the bottom, it will, start at 0 as I haven't completed any tasks. And then over time, it will burn up and it will get closer and closer to that total. So again, this is probably optimistic. I don't know that I'll be using Obsidian like long enough or consistently enough to actually see any of these to fruition, but it was very fun to play with all these options. It was very fun to play with the formatting and the colors and play with these community plugins to visualize some of this data. I don't have the full system developed here. As you can see, it's in pieces, and some of the pieces are connected and some are not. I think I got a good feel for what's possible with Obsidian, how I might use it, and I've got a lot of ideas going forward for what I can do to make this my own and make it useful for me. So, what's the verdict? Am I deleting my Notion account today and moving everything into Obsidian? Probably not, but I do really like Obsidian. I had a lot of fun playing with all the different features, playing with the plugins, planning out different ways that I might use Obsidian in the future. A lot of which are not really possible in Notion because of the structure that they sort of impose on your workspace. I want to keep this experiment going a little bit longer to see what I come up with and see how something like this might fit into my routine. I think one of the big benefits, as I mentioned at the start of the video, is that Notion is very different in its structure, and I think a change in structure may help me think about note-taking differently and maybe start to actually use my notes differently and more effectively. I've also been seeing, and you'll know about this if you've watched some of my videos from earlier this year, my complex Notion templates are very cool and very powerful when they work, but they're a little bit fragile. There was a bug in Notion earlier this year that made the database filters not work as expected, and this was the result of something on Notion's end. I could not control it. Reapplying the filters did not fix it, and so at that point I couldn't really use the template the way I had designed it, and it happened because of something that I did not do. It happened because of something that Notion did. And since Obsidian is just Markdown files being accessed in different ways by these plugins, something like that is a lot less likely to happen. And that means that if something breaks in a plugin, I can either remove that plugin, potentially downgrade it to an older version that was working, or, just take the data out and use it in a different way. And that makes me feel a lot better about spending time making these kind of complex templates, making these complex systems, because I know that I have a little bit more control over how I'm accessing that data. There are a lot of benefits to both, and they are designed with different goals in mind. So it's not really possible to compare Obsidian and Notion apples to apples. They're very different apps. I think Notion tends to be better for people who feel comfortable with a very structured note-taking system, who deal with data that is shared among members of a team, or who really rely on convenience and being able to access their notes from anywhere, having it synced automatically, being able to give and revoke permissions for other people to view your notes very easily. There's really not a lot of DIY that you have to do with Notion to get all of that working. But for Obsidian, you either do need to pay for a premium service or set up some sort of system that is outside of the app itself. And then on the other hand, I think Obsidian is better for people who really like freedom in how their notes are architected, who are looking for freedom in how they connect information between their notes, and also for people like me who their Notion has gotten a bit bloated to the point where it starts to search very slowly. Now it's possible that they've updated this, but when I was linking, sort of daily logs to all of my goals, I ended up with like hundreds of notes, and then whenever I wanted to reference a note somewhere else and I had the little search open, it was very slow. And that's a problem, obviously. You want your note taking to be snappy and quick. But I have seen, obviously I don't have experience with thousands of notes in Obsidian, but I have seen people with upwards of 5,000, 10,000 notes, and they don't seem to show any slowdown. Maybe they are experiencing it and just not showing it on their videos, but because of the simplified like Markdown layout, it is all just text. There's not really any like data structures built in the way that Notion databases might have. So I think as a rule, Obsidian is going to be a lot more responsive and a lot more performant. But that's all I have for this video. It's a bit of a long one. Thanks for hanging in there. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly had a lot of fun. I love playing with productivity apps, and this is a good one. It's good and complex and potentially very useful. We'll see. Let me know in the comments if you have used Obsidian, if you like it, if you don't like it, if there's any community plugins that you think I should definitely check out. And then also, I've recently heard of another productivity app that's more of a direct competitor to Notion called Capacities. So also let me know in the comments if you've used Capacities or if you'd like to see me take a look at that app as well, because I think that would be a lot of fun. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I'll be back soon with another video, and I hope to see you there. Bye bye.